I am Matt Murdock, and I am not afraid. You tell him. Tell Tenfingers he's done, and there's nothing he can do about it. He's just making it worse for himself. Today on the Comic Book Report, Daredevil Back in Black Volume 1, Chinatown by Charles Soule and Ron Garney. Stick around and check it out. Greetings all, my name is Dominic, and once again you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today we're going to be talking about my favorite superhero. Of course, I'm talking about Daredevil. There have been so many incredible creative teams writing this book in the last couple decades, and recently I feel like I've had a ton of watchers ask me, what do I think of Charles Soule's Daredevil? To that end, it's up for review today, the Volume 1 Chinatown. And before we jump into today's review, if you're looking for collected editions, please check out our channel sponsor, organicpricebooks.com. You can use my code, TheComicBookReport, at checkout to receive $2 off of your order today. Please note if you use my affiliate code or links for a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a great way to support the channel at no additional cost to you. Thank you for considering. Now let's get to the review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Charles Soule and illustrated by Ron Garney. The issues in this volume were published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2015. The volume itself collects Daredevil, the 2015 series, issues 1 through 5, and material from All New, All Different, .1 issue 1. Finally, this standard size trade paperback comes in at 120 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that trade paperback collection, and I love the cover art here. We obviously have Daredevil and his new sidekick, Blindspot, who himself is a mainstay throughout Charles Soule's run of Daredevil and a great new addition. Now, I do have Charles Soule's run collected across trade paperback volumes. There was an omnibus release that I did not upgrade to at this time, but you can still find that around in secondary markets. I believe it's currently out of print at the time of this recording, but you can still try to find these around. So this is a roughly 5-issue little paperback, so it's a pretty zippy read, but it's a whole lot of fun, and I think it really establishes a good groundwork for everything Charles Soule builds during his run. And after we finish out looking at the exteriors here, I will take a moment to show you the binding as well. Now again, this is a straightforward Marvel trade paperback, so the binding is just a glue, but I really think that this was well bound. I have no real problems with this collection, and I think because it's so small, there really isn't a ton of gutter loss either, which is a nice perk, and overall, just a really great little book. And now that we finished taking a look at that, we can dive into the collection proper. And right from the jump, I'll just say that this run takes place directly after Mark Waid's legendary run on the title. We know that Waid kind of reinvented and went back to some basics for the Daredevil character by having an overall more light-hearted approach to our favorite horned crime fighter. Waid's run also brought Matt back to San Francisco, so he wasn't even in his native Hell's Kitchen. That is something that was rectified by Charles Soule, bringing him back to the kitchen and having a much darker feel. One of the most notable things from Soule's run, in addition to the inclusion of the sidekick Blindspot, is of course this very stylized art style provided here by Ron Garney. It's a really striking visual style, filled with a lot of harsh, sharp edges, dark colorings, predominantly black, white, and red, and it just really pops out of the page. And you can definitely see it within even the first issues of this run in this paperback. So without any real explanation at the beginning of this run, we all of a sudden have Daredevil back in Hell's Kitchen with a sidekick. Nobody knows his secret identity anymore, and Foggy Nelson, his best friend for so many years, inexplicably basically hates him. For those that maybe hadn't finished out Mark Waid's run, this is a very big jump and kind of a shock to readers that are just following the runs back to back to back. I know when I picked up this first volume, I nearly got whiplashed at the tone and the change in all of these character dynamics, and I thought for sure that I had missed something important that bridged between Mark Waid's run and this Charles Soule run. I'm happy to report that this was not only not the case, but actually this was part of Soule's grand design as we explore the nature of what happened between the end of Mark Waid's run and this Charles Soule run throughout his actual run. We get a lot of flashbacks, we get a lot of character interactions that reveal slowly what happened and what brought Daredevil to this point, and it goes further obviously into the adventures of Daredevil during this period in his life. The Charles Soule run in general is considered the Back in Black Daredevil series, and that's largely because he is back in his black costume, back in Hell's Kitchen, and back to some of the grittiness we've come to know and love in the recent years. In Volume 1, Chinatown, we have Matt Murdock kind of giving up his role as a defense lawyer, instead favoring to take up a role in the district attorney's office. He's still within the law profession, but he has kind of a different function now. I thought that this was a really fun approach to the actual Matt Murdock character, and it allowed for a lot more play in the kind of law sphere in ways we hadn't really seen with his character before. On the Daredevil side of it, as I've mentioned earlier, he has taken on an apprentice or a sidekick in the character of Blindspot. His whole dynamic is he's very trained with martial arts, and he's developed a technology in this suit to render him visually invisible to just about everyone. This was a really cool dynamic since Daredevil is himself blind and can't see, but he can sense and be aware of Blindspot, but his power allows him to be physically invisible to everyone. I thought that this was a really creative and almost poetic approach to a Daredevil sidekick, and one of my favorite things about this entire run was seeing the kind of mentor-discipleship relationship that Matt Murdock got to have with this sidekick character. I think that this character definitely needs some more play, and he was a ton of fun throughout all of Soule's run that I can recall him being in. As far as the main baddie or antagonist in this volume, that has to be kind of this crime lord figure within Chinatown known as Tenfingers. He's this really creepy sort of religious gangster leader of this Church of the Sheltering Hands, and he actually has 10 fingers on each hand. And he's just really freaky and into some dark stuff. We find out that he's actually stolen something from the hand. Because of that, Daredevil knows that the hand is coming back to the kitchen, to Chinatown, to rectify everything that's happened with this 10 fingers character, and Daredevil's trying to stop things from escalating or getting worse because he knows wherever the hand goes, trouble is soon to follow. And he's already grappling with Tenfingers, who him and his organization are also a lot to handle. With these two adversaries kind of coming to a head, Matt Murdock and Blindspot are in for a ton of action, ton of fights, ton of choreographed kind of martial arts looking sequences and paneling, and it's just a whole lot of fun, and it really does establish subsequent arcs we see in Soule's run, introduces a lot of great characters. We also have some of Blindspot's backstory and some of his familial relations and how they may or may not have ties with some of these criminal organizations, and it's just a really fascinating, just foundational entry into a pretty serviceable Daredevil run. Taking a second to switch back from the narrative and storytelling focus of this volume back to the world of the artistic touches in this book, I have to say what Ron Garney does here is absolutely gorgeous. Like I said, there are sharper edges and lines to his style, and I think that overall his exploration and experimentation with panel layout should absolutely be commended. I think that what some of the best Daredevil runs get right for me is that they understand the martial arts and really action-oriented aspects to his books, and I think that that is really on full display in the artwork, especially in this run, and even within the first couple issues of this volume. The action is frenetic, full of life, and just something to behold. I also think that the color palette is very, very visually striking. Like I said, a lot of black, white, and red, and I think that that really just punches up a lot of the Daredevil central characters, and it allows for a much more striking contrast whenever we get some of the cooler colors like your blues and purples or even pinks. They really jump off the page, and it just has this really striking effect, and I think that that's used so well throughout this volume. I also think that the villains that we see are so sinister looking, again with those hard lines and the coloring they use. It just really feels kind of monstrous and otherworldly, and I liked that aspect to the art design here. I do think that this art direction might be polarizing to some, as it is heavily stylized and very different from what came before with Mark Waid, or even before that on some of the previous character interpretations. I think if you're a fan of comic book art, however, this is definitely something that you should see. The art direction in this book is easily unlike anything I've really encountered before, and I think that visually it is again so striking and memorable that often when I think about Charles Soule's run just on the whole, everything about it, the art is one of the things that I remember most clearly. And that's a good thing, and it really should be a testament to everything that Ron Garney and the team does here on this book. Jumping back to the character side of things, I do think, again, one of my favorite features of this early volume is that mentor-disciple relationship between Daredevil and Blindspot. We've never really seen Daredevil in a mentorship kind of role before. We've seen him be mentored by Stick and things like that, but I cannot really remember him ever having this functional role in someone's life, and I really like to see that. And it was interesting as this run develops, how Blindspot maybe takes after him or doesn't, and how Daredevil instills certain lessons about the world of crime fighting or kind of fails him in different ways. I think one of the more commendable things about this relationship that's developed in these early issues is how out of place it does not seem. It feels like a natural progression for this character, and instead of feeling horned in or cheesy, I felt like this was a very fun and fresh new approach to this character, and I felt like Daredevil lent himself to it exceptionally well. And I think that that can be surprising if you read it on paper, but when you see how well Charles Soule executes it, well, you'll frankly see what I'm saying. I also think the relationship between Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson was also an interesting development that Soule brought to the table. We sometimes see those characters at odds, but it's been rare to see them as opposed to each other as we see in this book, primarily with the hostility Foggy Nelson harbors towards Matt Murdock based on something that happened after the events of Wade's run that gets further developed and illuminated as you read more into Soule's run, and I won't spoil it here. But the two friends are at odds, and it's hard to see that dynamic really pushed to its edges and frayed and damaged in a way. I do think that that was a very fresh approach as well, as we've seen a lot of love between those two characters. That best friendship is a really fun dynamic, and I think it was also really very sweet and strong throughout most of Wade's run, so to see them at odds in this way was both upsetting but very interesting. I found myself paying extra attention whenever the two of them were in a scene, and I just thought it was really well handled. And I thought as far as the villains went, again, Tenfingers is a fun new addition. He's very creepy as this kind of cult or occult leader. I think that that really comes into a direct contrast with Matt Murdock's Catholic faith and just the darkness that we see in the Tenfingers character and his organization. I think also the tie to the hand really added another sinister layer to this whole narrative. And who doesn't love a good story with the hand? I'm really happy they already got them back in this first volume. A really great issue with a lot of great sequences, and the characters really just helped flourish this title. I also want to say, if I didn't mention earlier, that this run can be read from this point for new readers. I don't think you really need to read any previous Daredevil to really enjoy what we have here. The story does really begin in medias res, which means there's a lot of events that have already transpired, but we jump in at a logical jumping in point, and Charles Soule really fills in the blanks as we go. I do think that in general, it's easy to start at the beginning of a creative team's run on a book, and I think that that's definitely true here. This Charles Soule run also runs all the way into the Man Without Fear, The Death of Daredevil storyline by Jed MacKay, not to be confused with Daredevil, The Man Without Fear by Frank Miller. At any rate, Man Without Fear, The Death of Daredevil by MacKay does bridge between this Charles Soule run and the Chip Zdarsky ongoing Daredevil run. So I think that this is the last major creative team run on the Daredevil title before you get to the modern era with Chip Zdarsky. So for those wanting to read a more contemporary Daredevil that maybe haven't tried Zdarsky yet or have and want to read something else that's recent, I definitely could recommend the Charles Soule run. While it's not my favorite run on this outstanding title, I do think it's still a really great run and is for sure above average. You could do so much worse than this run, and I think for Daredevil fans, it's definitely one to check out. And that's really going to wrap up our look at the Volume 1 Chinatown from Daredevil by Charles Soule and Ron Garney. All that's going to be left is to give this collection a grade, and please let me know in the comments if you'd love to hear more about this run on Daredevil. But for now, the grade. For effectively setting up a new status quo for our favorite horned superhero, in conjunction with some outstanding and stylized artwork throughout, and even a brand new incredible sidekick, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Daredevil by Charles Soule, Volume 1 Chinatown, a B. This was a fantastic Volume 1, and I think a pretty decent spot for new readers to jump onto the title. I do think that there are better Daredevil runs out there, but I still think that Charles Soule's run is one that shouldn't be missed if you're a fan of Daredevil. Again, the art direction is absolutely flawless and stunning, and I think that there's really a lot to offer in the characterizations we see within this run. This is an above average read, and definitely a series I would recommend. But let me know what you think in the comments below, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again, and have a good one.